And I
It,
wish
it,
we would focus on that and let the lawyers and the professionals deal with the legal arguments, the compensation scheme, and stop freaking the out all over social media.
this is Byron Lazine, and today the Notorious R.O.B fills in for Nicole White, and you are listening to episode 308 of The Real Word. Rob, thank you for joining me today. Nicole lost her voice. She's
No,
under the
man.
weather. She will be back soon enough, but you are maybe the best replacement we could have. Nicole thinks the world, I'm serious, and Nicole thinks the world of you, so I know she's disappointed to miss this
Yeah.
one, but we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
We had a HousingWire debate, I guess, a couple of weeks ago, where Anthony Lamacchia, a broker out of Massachusetts, debated Michael Ketchmark, the lead attorney in the Missouri case. Obviously,
Yeah.
Sarah Wheeler from HousingWire was the moderator. You then wrote a Substack,
Yeah.
which, if you haven't checked out the Substack, I know last time you were on the Real Word, one of the very few Real Word repeat guests, by the way. We rarely have guests, and now you're on here twice. Notorious ROB, Substack.com is where you can find that. We'll link it down below. You wrote a brilliant piece reacting to that. Then there's a RISMedia panel that Anthony Lamacchia was again on. I want to break it all down with you. So first,
Sure.
well, thank you for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me, and Nicole, feel better. I cannot fill in for you. I can't fill your shoes, so I think Byron's gonna need you back sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. On the Housing Wire debate, Sarah, I thought first of all, Housing Wire did a great job. You
Yeah.
wrote that in your Substack. I agree with you there. I love Housing Wire,
Sure.
and I actually think the world of Clayton Collins, CEO of Housing Wire. He's brilliant. He's doing some really unique things. I will say that I did text him personally after this debate, and I wasn't, just to share my displeasure with the whole debate and really who they put up there as a spokesperson. And it's not just Housing Wire. Inman has put up Anthony Lamacchia as a spokesperson, quote unquote, for the industry. Housing Wire, now RISMedia. It's puzzling to me. We'll get into some of
Hmm.
that. But overall, Sarah asked really great questions. I don't know why she couldn't get her camera to stop bouncing around. It was like on a pogo stick. That was infuriating. But other than that, they did a phenomenal job. I have some things that stuck out to me from the Housing Wire debate. You covered some stuff in your Substack. What were the big flaws in the debate to you? And then I can share some of mine and we can react to all
Sure.
of those.
Um, I think so there's a couple, right? One is just the overall combative, like I'm here to take you down thing, that Anthony brought to the table. Like it wasn't a debate in any sense of the word, right? There was no attempt to try and explain like how we in the industry see things, and then the worst thing really was just devolving into personal attacks, both on Ketchmark and even worse on the judge, right? And what I wrote in the Substack is, listen, I don't know if you know. Well, I mean, obviously, Anthony didn't know this, but NAR, like these corporate defendants, are in front of this judge, trying to get the judge to rule in their favor on a couple of really key motions, like, for example, the appeal bond motion. And again, it's like I don't necessarily expect everyone to understand this, but my audience does because I've been writing about these things for so long. But this notion that we're going to appeal this, we're going to win. I'm like, okay, but before you can appeal this decision, this jury verdict, you have to post a bond that's equal to the amount of damages plus some. That's $5 billion. So what they need the judge to reduce that bond amount so they could
Well,
post a bond, right?
yeah.
And in that environment, like you're gonna go and insult the judge. You're going to talk about, Ketchmark's sister-in-law. You're going to question the judge's appointment. Like, what are you doing? like, zip it. Shut up.
Because what we're not debating here, Ketchmark said, one of the things I wrote down is, do not attack the integrity of the court system.
Right.
I won't stand for that. We're not debating and that's where Lamacchia was one of his big L's, got into this, integrity of the court system. Unfortunately, we're not debating that.
Right.
Do attorneys, can you question that attorneys have fixed their pricing on suits like that? Yeah, but that's not what we're debating
That's
at
right.
all.
That's
So
right.
you're getting way too far away. Unfortunately, I thought Anthony Lamacchia's only defense was to continue to say that is ridiculous. That's not a defense backed by any type of facts uh, in
Sure.
this case. So what else stuck out to you? I agree with you. The
So
personal attacks,
the first of all, let's make this clear, because I've heard from friends of mine that like Anthony's pissed at me and hates me, or whatever. I'm like, I don't know the man. I don't think I've ever met him. If I
ne-
have, do you know what I mean?
neither do I.
Yeah,
So I want to make that clear.
he might be. He's probably a wonderful guy. He's probably a great broker, and he's a coach. And I'm saying this is not about him. I don't know him. It's not that.
Numbers on the broker's side speak for themselves. He's been very successful in
Great.
his brokerage business.
And I don't think you could be that unless you have some charisma and talent. So it's none of those things. Like, let's just make that real clear. I don't know him. This is nothing personal. And frankly, I would say this about people in the industry that I really do like. Like in the RISMedia thing. One of my best friends, James Wiggins, was on there. If James was saying crazy shit, I would say the same thing. It's like, hey, James,
And,
stop saying crazy shit. You know what I mean? Like, it's not about the person. So let's make that clear. Um, it's, like I said, the overall thing, the personal attacks on the lawyers, on the legal profession, on the judges, that was the worst. You know, uh, the other thing is just the overall demeanor, right? And Ketchmark, again, let's face it, Ketchmark wasn't necessarily like he was also real combative,
yeah, he
right?
wasn't likable. I mean, but we're also on
Yeah,
on one side of it.
yeah, but again, he lost his temper a couple times. He raised his voice, etc.
Certainly.
But when you look through all of that, he made sure to point out this is not against realtors. I don't know if you remember that. If people
He said
catch
it
that
numerous times.
numerous
Yeah,
times. It's nothing against realtors, nothing against agents. The agents are valuable. He said all those things, and he just kept it on. It's the system. I'm attacking the system. I'm attacking the corporate defendants, as he put it. I'm attacking NAR, and he never attacked Anthony personally, right? Uh, so that's a little bit of, I don't even know what to call it, like tribal trash talking, right? It was a little
yeah.
bit of the let me go after this guy, right? And then we're supposed to be like, yay, our whatever linebacker sacked their quarterback. And it's like, that's just not helpful for us.
Right.
It's not helpful, right? And again, the points I made in the article was we need this judge to rule in our favor in a couple of
Yeah.
really key motions, right? Uh, they're saying they're going to appeal this lawsuit to the Eighth Circuit. Court of Appeals judges are human beings. Court of Appeals judges were all lawyers before they became Court of Appeals judges. So now this case in front of them, they have to make a ruling. If they're thinking about, yeah, so the realtors that are asking for this, if their image is Anthony Lamacchia screaming and yelling and that, how likely are they to be like, you know what, these are good, solid professionals. They're not intending to break the law. They're not, right? It's just this strange little, thing of the antitrust law. So we're going to rule in their favor. How likely are they to do that versus, hey, you know what? Realtors are like that. It, fuck those guys. I mean, like, come on, guys. Right. So that was another thing. All companies are trying to settle with the defendant here. In order to settle, the lawyer on the other side has to agree. Like, they have to go along with it. Like, and now we're up to, I think, 20 different law firms that are bringing
Yeah.
20 different lawsuits. How helpful is that? Right. So, meaning, if you think about it, the very first thing that NAR's lawyers will have to do when they walk into that settlement conference room is to say, we have nothing to do with anti-Lamacchia. We have nothing to do with any of that. Like, that is
And
not
this was
us.
something you wrote in your Substack, that NAR should distance
They
themselves
absolutely
as
should.
far away from Anthony Lamacchia as they can.
Yep.
Obviously, I would argue that HousingWire, RISMedia should have more of a dog in the fight, but NAR has an enormous pit bull in the fight, and distancing themselves from Anthony Lamacchia is just good business at this point
It has to be
because
done.
he's saying things that can be used against them.
Yeah. And it's a little surprising to me that they haven't yet. right? And as I put on Twitter, their silence is very telling, right? If so, you know what? At some point, we're going to be able to draw the reasonable conclusion, right, that Anthony Lamacchia is the unofficial spokesperson for NAR. Because if
To
he's
your point,
right,
Ketchmark labeled him as such
right,
numerous times.
right,
He said you are you he said you keep using we. You keep using we, Anthony. And
hmm
this is the problem with putting somebody up against a Michael Ketchmark who's not in this arena. He can pick up on words
yep,
and create create a case around those words that
yep,
when you're watching it's very enticing. And he said you are now the mouthpiece. Now when you say he didn't attack Anthony personally, he went right up to the line comparing him to a child at a
sure,
couple of
sure,
different
sure,
moments there. So he's smart. I mean, Michael Ketchmark's
yeah,
very intelligent,
yeah,
and so he's going to find ways to go up to that line and get the emotional state of a guy like Lamacchia ratcheted up, which is why I think he's the poor choice. We can get into some of those choices. One thing that really stuck out to me, I think, well, you mentioned the demeanor of
yeah.
Anthony in this debate. It was off. It wasn't on point with what we need as an industry.
No,
But that's reflective of the demeanor that's set at the top of NAR since the beginning of all of this. This to me, NAR has led from from the start on this is a non-issue. We're going to win this. They're doing it the same thing with the appeals. And so is he getting his demeanor from the top? Is that kind of
I
where
don't know, and I can't say, and I guess I'll disagree in the sense that NAR leadership, so the presidents, the actual official spokespeople, right, the PR people, I've criticized them a hell of a lot for a lot of different things, right? Specifically, I criticize NAR for not doing more to educate local and state leaders about this lawsuit back in 2019 and forward, right? But
Hmm.
leaving that to side, like they've always been pretty professional about it, right? Like we've never had I don't know. Like whenever NAR presidents have spoken about this issue, Tracy Casper is the one that I comes to mind because she's the one who had to go. I think it was on CNBC or whatever, and right, they never
her
lost their
short
temper.
stint was in the middle of it?
Yeah, you know what I mean. Like there's, you never heard them go get crazy and start talking about lawyers and their contingency fees. You never heard any of them mention the judge and his confirmation
No,
process.
no, no, no,
Right?
not that stuff.
None
Okay,
of that
so
stuff.
that's
So
what you mean by demeanor.
I don't get that.
When I
Right? Go ahead.
when I'm talking about demeanor, I'm talking about NAR has said multiple times this case is ridiculous,
hmm
and that ended up being Anthony's only defense, and it's like that was essentially the defense in
Sure.
Missouri courtroom.
Sure.
That's the defense on this debate. It's not a good enough defense, and I guess that's where I'm going with demeanor. When you're
Sure.
talking about demeanor, you're talking about the personal
Sure.
stuff. Totally agree there.
Sure.
NAR hasn't done any of that.
They haven't done anything like that. But wait, addressing your point though, what NAR could, should, and it's not even NAR at this point. At this point, we can't just put it on NAR, right? Unless it turns out that Anthony Lamacchia is in fact kind of doing this at NAR's behest. Let's assume that he's not, because he said publicly many times, "I'm not the NAR spokesperson." Blah blah blah.
He did.
Even though he is a current chair of an NAR committee, and you and I both know, if you know the way Realtor World works, you don't get to be a committee chairman without some connection, some blessing, But let's leave that
A
to the
hundred
side,
percent.
right? That's
Yeah.
just, Um, what they really need to do, I think, and so it's somehow we as an industry need to kind of put forth is even with the negative verdict, because that's the point that Ketchmark made over and over, right? The jury already held against you. The jury
Yep.
already said this is anti-competitive. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't pay. It doesn't help us in any way to just keep arguing. Well, that's wrong, right? Like the jury already decided, right? Like at this point, say, well, jury got it wrong. Let the appeals court deal with that. That's not a smart sort of way of going forward. What the smarter thing, because I think this is actually true, is 99.9%, maybe 100%, right, of brokers and agents who are doing cooperative compensation, we're doing it because this is the only system we've ever known,
Mhm.
right? Like No, like I don't think anyone alive today was practicing real estate back in 1923. When this system was put in place. Like everyone who's in the industry today came up in an industry where cooperative compensation was just a norm. It's a given. It's the rule. In other words, nobody was doing this to try and screw consumers. No one was doing this to keep prices high. We were doing this because this is how we were sort of raised in the industry, right?
Yeah.
So in other words, the overwhelming impression we need the judges, the lawyers, the public to have is that realtors are good people. They're professionals who care about you, who really genuinely give a shit about you, the homeowner, the home purchaser. And this legal thing is 50, 60 years old, right? Like none of us are out here trying to figure out a way to like it's nothing like that's the overwhelming impression we need to give. So even if the law ultimately says look, this is a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act, right? We need the public to sort of say, okay, well, these guys were just working in a system that's decades old that happens to be anti-competitive, but my realtor, my broker are not scumbags out there trying to screw me for my money. That's the impression we need to give, not this. And I wish if NAR were doing anything, I wish what NAR, maybe it's the state associate, maybe it's brokers, I don't know. Somebody could do a little bit of training to anyone who's going to go on a podcast, anybody who's going to be who not even represents us getting in the public eye to point that out, right? And I think if Anthony were here, if he and I were debating, like it's the debate to me would be, Anthony, did you ever try to go jack rates up, commissions up, so that you could screw the consumer? And the answer is going to be no. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like no one's doing that. We're doing it because this is the way we all came up. Like, of course you do corporate account. This is just the system we're in. We don't have to defend the system to our death. What we have to defend to the death is the fact that realtors are good people who are professional,
Yeah.
who give a shit about the client. That's what we got to defend. And that means we have to abandon, hey, it turns out the system we all grew up in is illegal. Happy to abandon it. Let me figure out how else I can help you. That's the messaging to send, not this, not that, right? I mean, that's the issue.
Yeah, because the system will look different moving forward. To your point about we need to acknowledge the L that's on the board.
Right.
We lost this, trial, and whatever happens in appeals happens in
Right.
appeals. But there's no question with DOJ pressure, 20 other lawsuits that you mentioned, that there are going to be changes to the system moving forward.
Right.
But what's been acknowledged over the last 20 years by Zillow, who didn't acknowledge this in year one or year two, is that the consumer overwhelmingly wants the representation of an agent. And to your point, agents are good people. They're working hard.
Of
They're
course.
negotiating a commission. Ketchmark went to talk about how many thousands of commissions were at a certain number in Missouri.
Yep.
But you could point to almost any other state where they're going to be different. And there's a lot of options. And Anthony didn't focus on those options. He said it once, that sellers have all these different options, even right now. I think some of the other big misses,
Mm-hmm.
he didn't have an answer for, Ketchmark said it 3 or 4 times. Name another industry that does this. To your point, you don't have to, defend to the death the current system. But when he did have a conversation with Josh Flagg before the trial, Josh Flagg from Beverly Hills, I mean, at least Josh was able to come up with one immediately.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at the way every auction is done, whether it's
Sure.
in high-end luxury real estate, fine art,
Sure.
jewelry. There's an example there. And real estate, purchases, are they more similar to auctions
Sure.
than,
Sure.
buying? Of course, they're more similar to auctions than buying something like a car or something like that. I thought that was a big miss. At one point, Ketchmark said that NAR owns Realtor.com, and not pointing that out was, now I'm playing a little bit of Monday
Sure.
morning
Sure.
quarterback here. I wasn't in the heat of it like Anthony was. But these are obvious things that you could have, stood up, and he just veered way too far off of the core case, which you're making, is that, hey, the profession is needed by the consumer. The consumer wants the profession. and they're good, hardworking people.
I think my general take on this, and again, I one of the reasons I wanted to do this because I know you have a large audience of brokers and agents. And fact is, every single one of them are an ambassador for the industry, right? Because when you go out and represent clients, guess what? That client's view of the industry is you, right? So I wanted to make this point.
Agents looking to stand out from the crowd, Reminder Media is a resource you have to check out. You get your own branded print and digital magazines, email newsletters, and social media content. Reminder Media delivers these resources to your contacts on autopilot, keeping you top of mind with your database. All you need to do is focus on your follow-up calls and watch referrals and repeat business come in. I just started using this service and I'm already seeing results from this after only a few weeks. Use the link below to try out Reminder Media.
Trying to argue the decision, trying to argue those little points of fact, they don't matter. There's not a consumer in the world who's going to hear about, well, this industry that, and then this point of law that, and they go, okay, well, now I'm on your side. That's not gonna happen, right? Like that is a lost cause. The difference that I think could be made now is to point out, and it might be useful to just understand a little bit of history, understand a little bit of the facts, just to say, here's why we are where we are, right? But what hasn't changed. So, let me give you just a quick 2 minute kind of thing about that. I've written about this on my blog, my Substack, etc. The key issue here is cooperation compensation began when sub agency was the norm. So if you look through some of the older literature from the 30s, 40s, 50s, the offer of cooperation was not offer of I'm going to pay you. Offer of cooperation was offer of sub-agency. If you bring me a buyer, I will make you my sub-agent. That's what the actual offer of cooperation was. And in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, whatever, right? Back in history, everyone understood it. The buyer understood this. Everybody understood it, right? So then, since you work for me, Anthony, right, as my sub agent, I'm going to share the amount of money I'm getting paid because you're my sub agent. That's how this whole system came about. All right, in the 90s, the industry said, hey, the sub agency thing is causing confusion. We're going to buyer agency. It was simply a mistake at that point just to go, hey, you know what? If we go to buyer agency, we should probably stop this compensation practice that we have. Do you know what I mean? Like, and the point there, I think is the important one is it was a mistake, right? It was an error made back then, as opposed to an evil anti-competitive scheme, right? I think the most important thing here for the industry, for brokers and agents, your most valuable trait, your most valuable asset is trust. If the buyer, the seller doesn't trust you, they're not going to hire you. If they don't
That's
trust you,
100%.
right, they will leave you, or for that matter, that's how you get sued after the deal is closed, right? When some seller, some buyer brings a lawsuit against you saying you screwed me, you whatever, it's because they didn't trust you, did something that felt like I don't trust this guy, right? He's not acting for my best interest. To me, that's the most important thing to preserve. And as an industry, the way to preserve it is to acknowledge what needs to be acknowledged, right? Or leave it to, you know what, we don't agree on the legal conclusion, so we'll let the courts decide. But Mr. Consumer or Mr. Public, let me explain how we got here. And our position as a profession is this wasn't some evil rule scheme that we worked up and we're trying to defend to the death. This was accident of history. This is just what happened. Cooperation meant this, so compensation meant that. And then in the 90s, we thought, okay, the systems worked fine, so we kept it. That's enough, right? That's enough. Let the courts decide what that comes. Let NAR go lobby, do whatever it is for the broker agent, the people who are out. Like, I think we just leave it at that and make sure the public understands. To me, that the realtors, the good ones that I know, because the bad ones, that's a whole separate story, right? That's not something
Yeah.
we need to necessarily air in public. But the realtors that I've worked with that I know are genuinely good people who genuinely care about home buyers, home sellers. And I've heard enough stories. My wife's a former broker. Like the emotion of handing somebody a key for their first house, right? The young couple, like everyone who's been in the business for some period of time understands that feeling, right?
Yeah.
Or helping the widow sell the family home that she and her former husband raised her. Like, everyone understands that feeling, right? And that's what this is all about. Like, and that's what fiduciary duty, like when you say you're representing, you're really watching out for their best interest. The good realtors I know actually do that. Compensation is entirely secondary. And I wish we would focus on that and let the lawyers and the professionals deal with the legal arguments, the compensation scheme, and stop freaking the fuck out all over social media and sounding like unhinged people, because it's hurting us. It's hurting you.
Absolutely. And I think this debate hurt the industry way more than it helped. I think it helped Michael Ketchmark way more. And that'll bring us into this. I think Haley might even have the clip. We can go through it, or we could paraphrase it. But the RISMedia put up a panel, and they invited Anthony Lamacchia onto the panel. Also, yeah, go ahead and play it.
One of the things that we've pointed out is, hey, look, you don't have to pay the buyer's agent. Okay, I know that some of the MLSs, like MLS PIN, which, full disclosure, I'm a member, I'm a shareholder, but some of the MLSs have said a minimum of $1. I heard Miami used to say a penny, now they say nothing. But sellers are not forced into paying any specific percentage or any large amount. However, if a seller brings that up, an agent should explain the truth to the seller, which is, hey, Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller, if you don't want to offer cooperating brokerage compensation, you don't have to. However, if an agent takes out a buyer to see homes A, B, C, and D on a given Saturday, and A, B, and D are offering cooperating brokerage compensation, but C isn't, and C is your home, that buyer agent becomes obligated to say to the buyer, hey, listen, happy to show you A, B, C, and D, but home C is not offering any compensation for me to bring you there to see the home.
You can see the body language of everybody kind of change. Everyone's sitting there then, as he lays that out, what he's, because you can go listen to the whole conversation there, but what he's talking about is essentially in a scenario where the buyer is expecting, cooperation from the seller, but then they've got maybe a buyer agreement that says, hey, I'm going to pay you as my representative in the case that a seller doesn't cooperate. That's what he's talking about. And, on Twitter, we can show, Haley, I'll give you the screenshots. You can show the tweet that Rob made and Anthony responded to. Rob makes the obvious statement there. And this is the statement. It's not that Rob's trying to come after Anthony in any way, because if Michael Ketchmark was making the statement, he said it on HousingWire's debate. The word is steering. Okay. Because what he's insinuating there is home C is going to cost more money out of your pocket. Then the consumer doesn't even look at home C, might be the right house for them, might be the house, by the way, that they could get the best negotiation with the seller on. They don't know because they haven't looked at it and engaged. And it pushes that consumer further away from that option. That is a definition of steering.
So that's what I tweet. And by the way, it's a small aside. I think a friend of mine sent me, Real Estate News apparently wrote an entire article that Anthony and I are in a flame war. And I'm like, in order for there to be a flame war, there have to be flames and there has to be a war. And I don't think I was flaming Anthony. I don't think he was flaming me. And certainly not a war, because that's not it. Anyway, so.
I mean, I'll be more blunt than you are. I think Inman, HousingWire, RISMedia, and, we can't say NAR directly, but those three outlets have made a massive mistake to the industry by putting Anthony Lamacchia up as a spokesperson. Now, Riz, to their defense, put James Dwiggins, who you mentioned earlier in the pod, on that panel. You go and listen to the way he thinks about, he's much more educated on the case and the whole situation going on than Anthony is. That becomes clear. He doesn't have as loud of a bark as Anthony does, but he's calm, he's collected, he's very well educated. I would trust him enough in a situation against Lamacchia or against Ketchmark in a debate than almost anybody in the
Sure.
industry, but it's still putting him in a
Sure.
tough spot as a broker owner in the Pacific
Sure.
Northwest.
So let's address that clip specifically. And this is an example of what I was trying to warn against in my post, right? Which is, we're in a hole, let's stop digging.
Yeah.
And what he said is steering. Because what he said
Yeah.
specifically isn't even just, if I have a buyer agency, then, if I show you this house, you're going to end up coming more out of pocket, right? What he said was, you go to the seller and say, your house is the only one out of 4 that's not offering this. So guess what the buyer agents are going to do? They're going to go tell their clients, if you buy this house, you're going to come more out of pocket. What that says is, now you're telling the seller, hey man, you need to offer compensation, right? Otherwise, you're not competitive. That's the heart of what Ketchmark and all these cases are. That's literally the heart of it. This is how the system keeps prices high, right? And I'm like, can we just stop? Just stop digging the hole, right? If you're going to go on public, in fact, the matter is, with social media, literally every single person watching this is going in front of the public, right? Just learn a little bit about the issues and learn a little bit about that. And here's the bigger point, like I said, is, what is your objective, right? So someone who's listening to, you're an agent, you go on Facebook and you want to write a lengthy screed about whatever, this issue, right? What do you want to achieve with that, right? You putting that out there onto Facebook to your whatever 500 friends or 1,000 friends or whatever it is, what is it that you want to achieve with that post on Facebook or a tweet, right? If you think you're going to achieve the Court of Appeals overturning this verdict, I got news for you. 5,000 followers on Facebook aren't going to do that, right?
No.
What is it you want? You want to achieve, like a legislative solution? I don't know if that's, you know what I mean? Like, what is it you want to achieve? Here's what I think. I think if I'm an active broker agent, what I want to achieve is for my sphere to understand that I'm a trustworthy professional.
Yeah.
That's what I want to achieve, right? And if so, think about how you need to position, how you need to approach this to achieve that, right? Because unless you're a lawyer in the courtroom, your legal opinions, my legal opinions, do not matter one goddamn bit. It's the outcome. Unless you're a judge on the Court of Appeals, your feelings and your views do not matter one bit. So that's my overall general advice. And stop saying things like, what boggled my mind was what he said, that 2-minute clip that's now on YouTube. There's zero doubt in my mind that Ketchmark and his law firm clipped those 2 minutes, right? And here's the other thing. I do need to make this point. I wrote it in my Substack.
To that point, he said during the HousingWire debate multiple times, I've looked at your videos, Anthony. He's doing a lot of due diligence.
Enormous research. So here's the thing, and I do need to make this point. Everyone wants to personalize this against Michael Ketchmark, right? The lead attorney for the plaintiffs in the Sitzer case. And it's like, Ketchmark this, and Anthony's go do background checks, talk about his sister. And I'm going, wait a minute. First thing that everyone needs to understand is that Michael Ketchmark is not the lawyer who brought these lawsuits first. The lawyers who brought these lawsuits first is Merle versus NAR.
Yeah. And
the lawyers there are from some of the biggest and scariest litigation firms in the country. Cohen Milstein, Hagens Berman, Sussman Godfrey. These are names, if you go talk to lawyers, they recognize them. These are names that Fortune 500 companies are terrified of. And those lawyers haven't said one word. Ben Brown gave one interview to Inman like 3 years ago, right? So this personalization to this one guy in Missouri. Meanwhile, there are much scarier, much bigger firms. It's stupid. It makes us look immature. It makes us look uninformed, right? So that's my take on it, man. And again, there's nothing against Anthony personally. I don't know him. But that statement is going to get played in a jury. That clip is that 2 minutes will get clipped out. And then the next big lawsuit, if it goes to trial, if I'm the lawyer, the first thing I do is pull that clip and go, right? This is what we're talking about. This system, which keeps prices high, ladies and gentlemen. Stop. Can we just stop? Can we just stop?
You're so right. And your point is make sure that the public in which you serve knows that you're trustworthy.
Right.
You're going to do that by educating the public. Now, I love what Ryan Serhant said to me when I sat down with him a couple of weeks ago in a one-on-one interview. He didn't take the broker approach of like, just ignore this, it's going to go away.
Yep.
What he said is be educated on it, know everything you possibly can about it. So where you just went from the 90s to today, you can speak on it, and then you can go back to articulating your value,
of course,
and negotiate your services fairly with the consumer.
Of course.
Love that. And what I'll even double down on saying is that you can't expect anyone to come and have your back. Now, like James Dwiggin says on Riz, like the only chance of a world where buyers can finance through Freddie and Fannie comes with NAR lobbying. I would agree with that. But if you're looking for your local board and NAR to be able to save your ability to articulate the value that you have and build trust, you might be disappointed in the end. I have a Super Bowl commercial that only played locally in the state of Connecticut.
Okay.
That I want to share with you.
All right.
This is what I mean by, if you're waiting for these type of boards and associations to come save the day, you're going to be waiting for a long time. So here's a Super Bowl commercial that played in Connecticut. I'm assuming it cost a lot of money because it was on the Super Bowl, even though it's just local to the state. This is from the Connecticut Association of Realtors.
Connecticut Realtors take into account something national news headlines and website algorithms don't. We know this is your house, your home, your future. If you've been on the fence about selling, now is the time. If you need space for a home office, a yard for your dog, or you simply want to downsize, we can help. With a Connecticut Realtor, it's never a seller's market or a buyer's market. It's always a you market. Contact a Connecticut Realtor today.
So this is stock imagery. Maybe the worst commercial ever played on a Super Bowl, besides, some local Honda dealership, could maybe be argued as a cheaper version of a Super Bowl commercial. Problem I have with that isn't how poorly the creative was on it. That there really was no message, that no consumer will ever resonate with that commercial. My problem, and this is a problem that's across the country, is that local boards and NAR are taking the resources that they do have and are just pissing them away. That is lighting money on fire that could be used in a lot of other ways. What's your take on how the associations are taking the resources that they do have and are just simply squandering them?
I mean, it's hard to say because it's dependent association, right? Like, I've consulted with some locals who do a phenomenal job, right? And with their resources.
What do you think of that commercial? React to that commercial.
It's terrible, but like maybe that's in the eye of the beholder, right? And look,
is that a good use of? What do you think that spot costs? A couple $100,000?
Oh, I have no idea.
I mean, it didn't cost.
It didn't
cost $5,000.
Let's put it this way: it didn't cost a couple $100,000 to produce.
That's for sure. But to get the airtime,
right?
You only got 20,000 members in Connecticut.
But that's up to the local whatever board and director. Maybe they felt like this is a good use of money.
This should be fired.
You know what? I that's a whole separate conversation. What I can say though is, look, man, at least as far as we know, Connecticut Association of Realtors is not embezzling member funds, right?
Like San Diego.
So there's that. I mean, maybe it's like a range of, badness. It's like good, honest mistakes. Like, okay, we can have a difference of opinion and maybe don't do that again. Don't waste money again versus, actual criminal behavior that's being covered up, right? Like that's a whole different thing. So, like, I don't know that that's really where the focus is. I do think the state associations for the most part have done a pretty reasonable job. Am I a huge fan of that ad? Somebody had that idea. Somebody thought it was a good idea. And the board said, yes, let's go ahead and do that. Where could they spend that money, though?
Since April, we have uploaded new and sought-after courses, content, and tactical assets for your business into the BAMX platform. not articles behind a paywall that only pontificate to you what you should think and do, but education that actually shows you how to do what you need in today's market. Every day, we continue to add more content into BAMX and our private Facebook community. Content that works, content that our members have exclusive access to daily. It's why over 1,500 of you and climbing have joined us in BAMX. It's also why tomorrow's price is guaranteed to be higher than today's. That's called inflation. Do not wait any longer. Use code REALWORD and join the thousands of agents taking their business to the next level today. Code REALWORD for 10% off. See you in BAMX.
I'd rather them keep it in savings for what's coming down. Here's the thing. The associations are faced with a decision to, if they're going to be valuable to members, they're going to have to, I think James Dwiggins makes this point, they're going to have to increase the dues. You're going to have to serve a smaller population that can afford that increase if we're going to have that lobbying intact moving forward.
Sure.
I don't think a whole bunch of different associations fragmented across the industry is going to serve the realtor well. The only chance of us saving the lobbying impact that NAR has is by increasing that due, unfortunately. But when you showcase when you're showcasing what you do with that money over and over again, which is to spend tens and tens of millions of dollars starting at NAR on marketing that we are. No consumers don't even know the difference between realtor and real estate agent, and over educating them on that is silly.
Of course.
Or this commercial. I'd rather them keep it in the savings for the day that is coming, which we've kind of articulated.
Sure.
The loss is on the board. There's going to be changes, and you're going to have to address those. What I think they're trying to protect, and this is where I have a problem with local boards and NAR, what they're trying to protect is a huge number to continue to pay them a certain fee so they can keep their jobs. If you had a job to end homelessness and you're making $300,000 a year in San Francisco, would you really want to end homelessness because you're going to get a medal and a handshake and you're not going to have that job anymore? Do you want to keep, and why does the number keep growing? Yeah. Well, you're paying people in that city $300,000 to end something they don't want to see end.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. And this is something I've been pointing out for years, right? Which is our industry's problem is the law bureaucracies, right? Bureaucracies expand. That's just what they do. It doesn't matter whether it's government or schools or companies or
government's a great example.
State, right? Like you start off with like, hey, you know what? Homelessness, we're going to address the homelessness. So we're going to appoint one person to look into the homeless problem. Next thing you know, that one person's like, I need to hire 3 assistants. And then those assistants go, wait a minute, next thing you know, the mission is like whatever. It's secondary. The primary thing is the bureaucracy has to keep expanding. That's just a general issue we just have to deal with as a society, as a country, as whatever. What we can help though on the Realtor Association side is probably to take another look at that, right? But here's the starting point of that. The starting point is very simple, right? Okay, in your practice of real estate, have you ever dealt with an incompetent, unethical agent on the other side?
Yes.
Were they a realtor?
Yes.
That's the problem. That's the problem. If the state and local association NAR did nothing else but to make sure that the incompetent, unethical agents cannot be realtors, that would solve a lot of these things naturally. Because you don't need the bureaucracy, right? If instead of, 30,000 realtor members, you're down to 5,000, right? Then you don't need this whatever staff support 30,000, right? So it just naturally ends up helping itself. And I think that's going to happen. That's one of the things that this lawsuit is going to do. I genuinely think that's one of the outcomes. Now, are the associations going to fight that tooth and nail? Of course they are. Like, I get it. If my job depended on it, I wouldn't, right? So yeah. I get that, but it is one of those sort of turning points. Going back to, like I said, reason why I wanted to come on and sort of speak to your audience, as you know, my audience typically is not ours don't overlap that much, is because every agent is representative of the industry, right? Every agent, because when you go and show a buyer a home, when you go do a list, like that's how it is. If you're going to comment on these commission issues, my strong suggestion is to make sure you think about what is that you want to achieve. As an individual professional, I think what you want to achieve is no matter what's happening over here, right, in the courts or the system, you, Mr. Client, can trust me. That needs to be the overwhelming impression that you give, right? And if you want to show off your expertise, then you further want to be able to say, let me explain to you, Mr. Client, how we came to be here. Here's what the debate is, and here's how things are going to affect things going forward. And here's what I do know, because I've spoken to some really good, really smart underground realtors. What they say is, look, we're going to do a buyer agency agreement because I want to make sure, right? Like, we're human beings. I'm going to look out for your interests, but you're going to have to pay me. When I hire my lawyer, guess what? I have to sign an engagement letter. It says I'm going to pay you. That's fair, and everyone gets that. But then after that, what they're saying is, look, I'm never going to paying attention to what the compensation thing is for. Like, it's step by step. Oh, you want to look at this house? We're going to go look at this house, right? None of this, well, before you look at this house, let me tell you, if you buy this house, it's going to be an additional $15,000 out of your pocket to pay me. That's just not even a conversation to have at that point, right? Like, let me serve you. Oh, we're going to look at these 10 houses and you like this one. Hey, we're going to negotiate. Hey, by the way, Mr. Client, so you know, this is the deal, right? But I'm still going to help you. Like, how do you want to work this? Like, how do you want to handle this? Like, that's the professional thing to do, right? And as a consumer, I would appreciate that, right? Byron didn't try to tell me, don't look at that house because then you're going to be out of pocket more. Byron just showed me the damn house and told me about the house and the whatever 15-foot ceilings and the wonderful, kitchen. And then I say, hey, I think I want to buy that house. And at that point, Byron goes, hey, listen, so that house doesn't offer compensation. We have a buyer agency agreement, right? So that means you might be coming out of pocket more, but we could work something out. Let me see what I can do for like. That's what, you know what I mean? Like, that is what I think it needs to happen. And if agents on the ground kept themselves to that, just maintaining the integrity, maintaining their respect and their honor and the professionalism of the industry, and maintain the trust of the consumers, you've done your part. Let the lawyers deal with the lawsuit. Let the talking heads deal with all that stuff. And unless you really educate yourself to don't dig the hole any deeper. That's really my big message.
And I think you nailed it there. Have that buyer agency agreement.
Yes.
And conversation in the beginning. Now that doesn't mean, here's where agents will make a mistake. Well, they'll get a phone call and they're like, I don't want to take you out unless, well, they haven't even met you yet. You need to have a couple meetings, most likely, like you would on a listing. How many times have you gone out on a listing, met with people in their home 1 to 3 times, and then you come to terms through negotiation of an agreement? The same exact scenario is going to be true for buyers. You may meet a potential buyer, 1 to 3, who knows how many times, and then you come to an agreement. You're going to be able to, based on, Ketchmark said something here that I think is in the HousingWire debate. How come people aren't paid on experience? If you're lacking that experience, it may take you 3-4 different meetings to be able to really fully gain the trust that with your experience, you're going to be able to be the right, representative for that buyer agent. They're going to want to hire you and move forward, as opposed to somebody who's really experienced, who comes with a lot of credentials and a lot of referrals. It may be one meeting. I'm going to explain to you my value prop. You already maybe know 50% of it based off of my reputation. Here's my agreement. We're going to sign and move forward. And maybe that person's maybe that person is being paid more because of that experience. I think that day's coming too. I thought
Sure.
Ketchmark made that point
Sure.
in that debate. Notorious ROB. If you want to be educated on this, I think Sirhan's right. You should know everything about it to have that conversation. One of the ways to do it is definitely go onto the Notorious ROB Substack and follow his content. It's notoriousrob.substack.com.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, there's going to be a link on this podcast for people to find that easily. You do put out a couple. I think this article, the law of the holes that we're talking about here, wasn't even in the upgraded version.
No,
but you can you can upgrade. So you can get a lot of stuff by doing it that way, or you can upgrade. I would suggest that you do that.
I appreciate
that. and follow along. So
yeah.
Notorious ROB, any final thoughts? Thank you for coming on, by the way.
Oh no, this was like I said, this was fun. It's always fun to talk to you. And my whole issue here is like I feel like you guys are reaching an audience that typically I don't talk to. And the overall point I want to make is it's not a us versus them. It's not a we're gonna win the argument, or let me tell you about, whatever, some fact. That doesn't matter. What matters is you want to make sure that your clients, your sphere, trust you. And the only way to get trust like that is to educate yourself and then not say stupid shit in public that's gonna put you like deeper into trouble, right? And I think that's really the message there, right? Don't lose your temper. Don't start ranting on Facebook. Just keep it cool, calm, and collected, and just think, what do I say here? How do I act in order for my sphere to trust me, right? As a professional. That's really the message I want to put out there. Like, that's how you win this, I think.
That's a great message, Rob. You've got to come back on because Nicole absolutely loves you. So at some point, you got to come back on for a third time. Hit the thumbs up
Sure, man.
if you agree that we should get the Notorious ROB back on the pod. Thank you so much for your time, and keep it real, guys. We'll see you
Take
next
care,
time.
everyone.